So today we're going to talk about professional ethics, boundaries, and helping relationships. So you guys know that this stuff is really huge. This is like the creme de la resistance when it comes to continuing education units. Everybody has to have this. Those CUs, if you are a social worker, licensed professional counselor, psychiatrist, psychologist, case manager, this is something that is indeed important for you to have. Ethics, this needs to be a part of every organization. And in this training, we're going to just look at some different strategies and how to protect the reputation of yourself as an employee, your organization, and the colleagues that you work with, as well as the clients that you serve, because the clients that we work with, they are indeed vulnerable individuals. So what we do with them and for them is definitely can be manipulated because they're so vulnerable. We can get them to do some things through coercion that could not be ethical for us to benefit from. So we want to talk about that, especially because this is like a two-part training as well. The first part is really hardcore ethics and ethics in the workplace. But the second component of it is really focusing on the boundaries in professional relationships. So that's how it's kind of diced up. So industry gossip, okay? These are some stats that I think that it's important to share, that 1/3 of employees witness ethical misconduct within the workplace. So, 1/3 witness that. Young employees and non-management employees are less likely to report unethical behaviors, right? So if they're new to the organization and if they're non-management, they see unethical things happening on a regular basis and they say, hey, as long as I'm getting my paycheck and it's not affecting me, I'm going to do what I need to do anyway to get my paycheck, right? 2 in 5 employees witnessed misconduct, but they didn't say anything about it. People don't say anything about it because they don't want to get themselves involved in, what goes on with management, meeting with them and really trying to find two sides of the story, especially if they weren't totally involved. Well, in fact, they were involved. So, for example, if we say like a sexual harassment, which is, unethical, right? But if it's like if I touched Angela inappropriately and Kim, you saw me touch her inappropriately, you know that I am the perpetrator, right? And so everyone will look at me and say, wow, Mike did something unethical. He touched Angela, right? But guess what, Kim, you're also a part of this process. If you didn't say anything, you're as guilty as I am. So that's something to keep in mind. So companies can reduce liability fines if they have a more formal ethics program, but really having a policy and procedure in terms of, what is ethical and non-ethical ways of, what's inappropriate and what's not inappropriate, what's ethical, what's not ethical within the workplace, and what's the expected behaviors. So ethics programs help to steer employees away from unethical behavior before the opportunity arises. So having those ongoing trainings, having policies and procedures as well, that's something that's key to helping employees to stay on track, because if you don't get appreciated, then I know it's some workplaces where I was employed, that if you don't feel appreciated as an employee, then you just sort of break the rules because you're like, well, I'm only making $8 an hour anyway. You don't really feel connected to the organization, so you feel that your inappropriate behavior is warranted, like you're validated to do some things that are inappropriate or unethical. Programs also decrease the company's vulnerability to misconduct and can harm business. Okay, so for example, stealing, lying, taking pens, taking paper clips. Like everybody does that, but see, everybody has this point of being unethical, right? But it's like a threshold. Like, when is enough, right? If this was Parker's paperclip, or and I took this, 9 times out of 10, if I see something else available around here that I need, I'm going to take that because nobody really said anything. You probably saw me say, oh well, this is with Mike's paperwork, so he used this paperclip, but it's not. Okay, but sort of a snowball effect. So organizations in transitions through like mergers, acquisitions, they can really benefit from installing or implementing an ethical program within an organization, because you're like already an existing organization, but because you're building and growing to a new organization, it's sort of as though if you are starting a whole new organization, right? Because so this gives you time to press the reset button and start over and come up with these new policies and procedures, especially if you saw some unethical things going on within the company prior to the merger and the acquisition. Because with mergers and acquisitions, you know that you lose a lot of the old employees, but sometimes that culture stays the same because you can just have one person. Like we talked about that a lot this year through all of our trainings when it was appropriate, that you could have one person within the workplace that could be totally inappropriate and they could be the cancer of the organization, but they can really develop a culture of doing unethical things, having a culture of employees that are not appreciative of their positions, and just being present, just coming to work every day is that's enough, not just doing a job. So ethics and values, okay, they are similar, but they are different. So ethics is more organizational and professional standards, when values are more based on our individual beliefs. So it's really important to decipher between the two, which one is what, and how you implement both of them within your work life and your personal life as well. Traditional organizational values, and these are some things that historically should be involved within the organization. So things such as trust, loyalty, commitment, honesty, respect. These are things that you want from all of your employees, right? And I think that these things are all really these are not big things to ask for, so avoiding conflict of interest. So that's, for example, you taking information from Parker and giving it to another foster care organization because you know that, they're going to have a position for a clinical case manager paying $20,000 more, but so you want to feed them with information to get you a spot. That's a total conflict of interest. But you want some innovations to be celebrated. You want your organization to have teamwork, to be focused on the customer, and just continuous improvement to say, how can I be better? I have my master's degree, but guess what? It's 10 years since I graduated. It's 5 years since I graduated. I continue to need to know and learn things because I want to be a lifelong learner. And I know that things are changing within the industry. There are different types of medications coming out, has different side effects on the clients that we serve. So it's all of these different variables that are going on. So it's all of those different things that we need to implement within our lives and within the workplace so that we can stay on top of it. And the way that we do it is from having some innovative trainings like myself come in here and share with you guys, all the things that's going on in the outside world. Okay, so types of unethical behavior, again, lying, something that's huge right there, lying, abusive or intimidating behaviors, okay, telling folks if you don't do these things, you're going to get punished this way. Okay, misreporting of hours, so working 5 hours a day, but putting 8 hours that you worked 8 hours, knowing that you didn't do it. Coming in, signing in, saying, hey, showing your face, I'm going to go see some clients, but you're going to drive home and go to sleep for another 8 hours and wash your laundry and don't do anything related to, working with your clients or related to your job description. Withholding needed information, so not handing in your paperwork or any other example where your professionalism is needed. Misrepresentation of products and services, again, stealing ideas, stealing intellectual property. Say, hey, I'm going to start my own therapeutic foster care program. So I have all of the forms that I need right here, girl. Right? All we got to do is take their logo off, put ours on there, and it's ours, right? That's stealing the intellectual property. Failure to maintain proper license and insurance. So presenting yourself as a licensed social worker, but not having a license. I just saw in the news they had this guy who was hired through the Baltimore City public school system, and this guy lied about going to Coppin, said he has a bachelor's from Coppin and a master's from Johns Hopkins, and he was hired to be on the Baltimore City board of directors for the education department. Well, Jane Miller got involved, and when Jane Miller gets involved, you're in hot water. And they said that this guy, he falsified all of his credentials. He worked at Coppin in admissions, and he saw somebody's transcript who had a 3-point something GPA, He took his name off, put his name on, and the guy came on, the student, every time he requested his transcripts, he was having some difficulty getting it. They couldn't do it by his name, and he had to put in his social security number, and every time they printed the transcript, it would have this guy's name on it, not his own name. So he didn't know. So it was just this huge conflict. And that's how it came out. So the gentleman who falsified this information, he graciously declined his seat from the board and moved on. But there's people who do that every day. So taking or offering kickbacks, because I could have said, hey, look, man, if you guys don't want to come to this CU training, give me the money, right? And I'll give you your certificates, right? There's people who do that, okay? Taking credit for work that you didn't do, and I'm stealing business as well. Seeing that the company is going to get an opportunity, but you're just putting yourself in the middle of that opportunity to say, no, let me funnel it over here and allow some other business entity to get it and in a way that you are going to be able to benefit from it financially. So why people don't report unethical behavior? Why don't they do it? They don't want to stand up to the boss and cause some attention. Some folks see the boss or the owners of the companies and they just want to cower down. They don't want to have any attention with them because sometimes the directors of these organizations can be intimidating, right? Some of them can have multiple degrees. They can have PhDs. They're teaching in Africa. They can be like making so much money. Sometimes employees are intimidated by the amount of money that their management makes, that they're intimidated by that individual, right? And they don't want to have any connection with them at all. And they see them in the hallway and they just kind of smile and get real nervous. That may not be the case here, but this does happen within the workplace. Why don't people want to report unethical behavior? Continue. They want to keep their job and will do whatever they are told. They don't want to rock that boat. They just want to keep their job. Say, I'm doing my 9 hours, my 8 hours a day. That's it. They don't think corrective action will be taken. So, Kim could see me touch Angela inappropriately, but say, man, if I was to report that, they're not going to do anything about it anyway. So I'm just going to sit here and shut up. Right? And some people think that.
Or sometimes you see it and people have a relationship with each other anyway. Right. Their own thing going. So you like, who you? Especially if it's the CEO touching. That's right.
Right.
Like, well, I've seen that, but I know that there's certain kind of relations going on. So
sure.
That's what they do.
But sometimes, you can never really assume because, case in point, when I was working in Bethesda, it was a woman, she was a deputy director. Now, this woman was old enough to be my mom, right? And, we would talk, and she always would say, oh, Mike, you're so cute. And, so I was like, wow, that kind of made me feel a little weird because you like my mom's. But, sometimes older people kind of say what they feel, right, and you let them kind of roll with it. And she always said, well, let's go to lunch. So went out for lunch. We had lunch and time to pay for lunch. She says, no, don't worry about it. I got it. I said, okay. I was making decent money, but she was making much better money than I was as the deputy director of a federal agency for 30 plus years. So she says, hey, I got it, right? So I said, okay. And, so we would joke and play around sometimes, but nothing was ever any physical, any sexual. So one day I was, so we had this relationship, like as friends. People saw us going to lunch together, joking. She's in my office, I'm in her office. Right. And how the office was set up is that our front desk person was right there. As soon as you open the glass door, she's right there. So I'm there and I'm talking to the front desk person. I'm leaning over. So my colleague, this mother type figure, she comes behind and she grabs my butt. Right, and she like squeezes it, but she doesn't say anything. She just kind of looks at it. I look at her and she like winks and she walks away. So I felt uncomfortable. So like you just said, it could be based on the type of relationships. So you see, hey, Mike and this woman, they go out. So you think that if you would have witnessed that, you would have probably said, well, that's how they play. But we didn't play like that. We didn't play like that. So I felt really uncomfortable. So, I should have been the person to report that, right? But I was the person that felt that, hey, I wanted to keep my job. I didn't want to make any noise. I was a little intimidated by the director of the agency. I just felt that I didn't really have a voice to say anything. And I felt that nobody was going to believe me, right? Man and woman, I'm a 30. At the time, I was like 37-year-old black guy. This is like a 54-year-old Jewish woman with 3 kids and a husband. Like, who would believe that she wanted me? They would instantly say, Mike's trying to get paid. You know, Mike wants money. Or at least that was my assumption. And just the thought about going through legal channels and, you know, having to explain that. And then what if I don't even get anything out of it, right? It's like I'm wasting all of this time. So that's the story. So even if you think that, you know, that's a good opportunity to ask that employee, like, you know, was that okay? Were you okay with them doing that? Because you never know. You wouldn't be surprised. Because if anybody saw that and asked me, I would have said, man, I didn't like that. And then, you know, if I'd have had that consultation, then I may have had the guts to say, man, I really was uncomfortable with it. But I didn't. I went in my office and cried. But you don't want to be seen as a snitch or a troublemaker either, right? You don't want to be looked at somebody who is telling on everybody else and that they're not trustworthy, because that's something that's associated with the traditional employee. You want to be seen as a team player, and you want to be seen as somebody that's all about the team. You don't want to seem like if you're snitching on people that, you know, no one's going to trust you and you're not going to be invited for lunch by anybody. 3 criteria to consider: focus on the outcomes or the consequences, focus on the rights, and focus on justice. So, you know, what are the consequences associated with this? How is the individual rights are going to be protected? And what are the interests of underrepresented people as well? So people are underrepresented. Like at that time, in that example I gave, I was a contractor. So although I was a professional, although I was making really decent money, I still was a minion up in the hierarchy, the chain. So I was an underrepresented person because, you know, I really didn't even know who was my boss. You know what I mean? Because I had so many, I didn't know who to go to. I'll say, okay, so guiding principles. Being ethical in the workplace ensures the following, okay? When you're ethical in the workplace, it's going to ensure professionalism, accountability, avoidance of harassment and discrimination, occupational health and safety, truth in advertising, environmental protection, confidentiality, community relations, political activity, lobbying, and business goals. So basically, you know, you don't really need all of the jesting at the workplace, right? Because that's when things get confused. That's when it's all blurred amongst professionals. When you have a case when you're like smacking each other on the behind or saying, you know, sexual, inappropriate types of language to one another, that stuff should not be tolerated in the workplace because, you know, it can, you know, today it may be funny to me. I may have an argument with my wife tomorrow and you come and say something, then I'm feeling like I'm being sexually harassed, right? I'm feeling, you know, so it all depends on the mood. So if you're professional and you say, hey, this is the type of environment we're going to have and it's consistent, then you can avoid those types of instances. So if I want to go to lunch with Kim every day and we want to do lunch together, I could be her work husband, right? That would be cool. Are you looking for your real husband? Oh, no. Okay. Well, you know, I'll be her work husband. You know, every day we're just going to work, going to lunch together. And on lunchtime, when we're not at the workplace, then we can chop it up about what we did, and we can have that banter when we're outside of the workplace. But when we're at the workplace, we know that we have to be really focused on the workplace, on our work duties rather. So, I mean, I know that it's different when it comes to human services versus corporate America. Corporate America, you come in, there's certain dress attire, you know, restrictions. You have to wear a tie and dress, you know, at least down above your knees and so forth, and a certain work etiquette that you need to have. You know, social workers, we kind of it's therapeutic for us to say, man, I was dealing with this child and the parents, you know, were off the chain, and this is, you know, so we kind of share what's going on, even if that's professional, that's good. But then when we start talking about personal characteristics and really how we really feel, you know, that's when we involve our values and, you know, our individual values with the service delivery, and they can be confused by some third party listening on. Okay, ethics program components, right? Having a component of ethics in the workplace. So how does this stuff help? Number one, to develop ethics codes and conducts. Right? So you have a code and conduct. So again, that's like a policy and procedure. If you want to say, oh, that's unethical, well, let's go and look at our codes of conduct within the policy and procedure manual and see how is that defined. So it's our playbook, it's our reference point. Communication is huge in terms of what is ethical and what's not ethical. And it does start from the top. It starts from the top, but it also comes from the bottom up. as well. But it really starts at the head of the organization. They set the tone in terms of the culture of the workplace that they want to have. And when I worked in corporate America, we had, it was a really rigorous interviewing process. So they found me on Career Builder. I came and they interviewed me. It was like a one-on-one interview. If I made the cut, then they would have me come back again. It was like I was on American Idol, and I'll come back again, and I would sit here, and this whole table would be full of people from different departments, and they'll just fire questions and scenarios at me. If I made it through that process, then they would allow me to come in a day of my own choice and shadow somebody who did that position for 4 hours and see how they did that job to see if I was interested. And then they still wouldn't offer me the job. They wanted me to call and say, hey, man, I really like this job, or email them to say, I'm really interested. What's the next steps? And then they made me the job offer.
Wow.
So, but what they did after I was in this organization for 4 years, I said, wow, I asked the CEO, I said, why was this process so hard to get in? And she said, because we want to screen heavily, because we want to have the same type of people here. We want to build a culture of the same like-minded people here. And it was. Like everybody went to University of Maryland for the School of Social Work, and they had big degrees on the wall, and everybody pretty much act the same. And everybody was around the same age. Everybody was walking around pregnant. My wife was pregnant at the same time, but that was like the culture. Everybody was doing everybody was buying homes at the same time. Everybody was at the same space or place professionally and moving upward and learning. I'm able to learn and multitask and do the job of 4 different people, right? So that was the culture that we had there. So it's the communication is huge. Training. So that's another component. Having trainings like this should definitely help on a regular basis, though. It would be great if all of the social workers were here, but it's good that that is a requirement under your licensures with continuing education, that they do have to have some sorts of ethics training, and having that, annually, right? Having that on a regular basis to know that these are ethics, because it's good to have that refresher course, because once you get comfortable, that's when anything goes, right? When you're comfortable with situations, that's when anything goes, and there's no holds barred. So preventative maintenance, having systems in place to prevent unethical types of behaviors. So signing of a contract in the start of your employment, maybe, to sign this contract to say, hey, look, working here at this organization, I promise to be ethical, right? And in every instance is possible. So some potential benefits of an ethics program, again, increase recruiting and retention of quality people. So again, just like that organization where I work, you want to recruit and retain quality people, because if you screen them heavily at the door, let them know what's ethical, give them examples of what's unethical and seeing how they would respond to that, that's going to be an indicator how